right, so let's go ahead and dispel some myths and talk about some truths. And so myth number one, education is broken. This really should be looked at as an insult. Weston Kieschnick talks about on page 10, and I totally agree with this. Education is not broken. As a matter of fact, we are making gains. In 2013 and 14, we graduated 82% of our high school students, and of those, it was our highest share of high school student graduates ever, according to the United States Department of Education. And then half of those graduates are off to college every year. Since the 70s, the National Assessment of Education panel has studied 9-year-old, 13-year-old, and 17-year-olds, and they have found that the 9-year-old and 13-year-olds are making reading gains. And not only that, but we're closing the achievement gap among racial and gender lines. And so the myth is that is definitely a myth. Education is not broken, but what is how we think about technology and teacher training for technology.
And with myth number two, it is the old way of teaching no longer works. So it's definitely a myth for several reasons. One thing that I want to point out first is that integrating technology, it is a non-negotiable right now in the 21st century. This is going to be the rest of their life. They'll use this forever. It is definitely an asset when it's used strategically and it's used to elevate and not replace instruction. So as mentioned in the prior video, the old way of teaching, it still works. It just needs to have a few pieces added onto it. I like the point made on the bottom of page 14 into page 15. It says we didn't scrap everything that we knew about mathematics when the calculator came along. And we shouldn't have to do that now. The object is to plug technologies into highly effective instructional strategies to achieve rigorous academic outcomes.
Myth number three, kids are digital natives. And so many times teachers say, well, they know a lot more about technology than I do, right? And so I'm uncomfortable. Well, actually, that's not true. Sure, they're great swipers, right? Swiper, no swiping. That's what I think about when I think of that. But one familiarity in one piece of technology doesn't mean that they're familiar with all forms of technology. And so while kids are really great with smartphones and tablets for entertainment and to socialize, do they really know how to use the computer for certain skills like fact finding or filtering online content? We are the experts at that, and we have to remember that. These are things that they are going to need to replicate for future careers. And so it's critical that we understand that they need you as a teacher, okay? Also on page 17, it says, when it comes to education, technology is the tie that binds. It's the one that unequivocally puts the student and the teacher in the position of learning. And so just remember, teacher, you are still the one that holds the key when it comes to using technology productively, smartly, and first and foremost with a purpose, for a purpose.
Myth number four is that technology must drive all decisions. That's not true at all. When it comes to blended learning, most of the work comes in at the very beginning, and that's when you're setting your goals for your academic outcomes. You know, what should they learn and know by the end of this? And then what you do is you plug the technology into your lesson so that it helps you meet those goals. And there's one particular sentence that really stood out to me. Very ending of page 18, the beginning of page 19. It is about choosing the pedagogy and planning for the best through strategic technology decisions. It starts with the planning piece and the academic piece first.
It seems like the words planning and strategic are going to be those key buzzwords throughout this whole training. So
Definitely.
Everything we do, we have to do with a plan in mind, and we have to be very strategic. So let's move into now truths. We've talked about myths. And so truth number one, blended learning can and should elevate, not diminish what you as a teacher do best, okay? So think about this question. What do you do awesomely? What do you love most about teaching? So you might be the master of peer tutoring. Great. What technology can assist you with what you already do so well? Let's find the technology that partners with your talent. Okay. Um, so, yeah. So when expertise and wisdom of the teacher is given equal weight in a blending learning equation, this is what is called old school.
For truth number 2, instructional practices, pedagogy, and academic outcomes must drive technology decisions. So this goes off of that last myth that I talked about. The instructional piece, the academic piece, it has to come first. Then you make decisions on technology. It's that when technology is not rooted in pedagogy, it hasn't been vetted. You're not going to be able to really reach your objectives, and it won't be effective. So make sure that your instructional strategies and practices come first, and then the technology.
Yeah, we go right back to that. You're choosing the activity over the goal.
Yeah.
And so it's critical that we have the goal first. Truth number 3, becoming a blended learning master means knowing how to use technologies to move toward academic goals. So on page 23, very critical, midway down, he says, we cannot put technologies in front of teachers and expect that they'll figure it out. It's very frustrating for us, and we really don't have time for that. And if we do make that mistake, we cannot blame them if blended learning initiatives fail. We're not IT teachers, or IT employees or data analysis analysts. We're teachers. Our purpose is school and to work with students. We want to cultivate relationships. We want to deliver target instruction that helps students learn. So our purpose as teachers, your purpose as a teacher, is to teach students, not teach yourself new technology.
The truth number 4, you're still the smartest, most needed person in the room. I think this is probably the most important truth in education and in this book. If you want, well, I'll come back to that. So a key point on page 24 at the bottom is that powerful instruction has always been and will always be about relationships. If you really want to have a relevant classroom, you have to take the time and form those relationships with students. Y'all know it won't work. The whole system fails if you don't have the relationships in place with your students. So only you, the teacher, can do this. A computer cannot and won't ever replace you. It's not possible. You can't form those important relationships through just a robot computer. They need you, the teacher, there as a respectful form of authority, and to see that caring relationship. It's so important. And then once that's in place, all the academics will fall into place as well.
Awesome.